Before the moon learned to weep, and before men dared to name the stars, there was Egypt, not the Egypt of stone and sand, but one of silk and breath, of sacred winds and divine murmurs. Her body lay curved along the spine of the great river, the Nile, her lover, her mirror, her pulse. It was he who carried the weight of heaven's sigh, and it was she who cradled the souls that walked the space between sunlight and shadow. And from the breath of gods, twin flames were born. Osiris, the green god, radiant and tall as a cypress in spring, whose voice carried the rhythm of life itself, and Isis, his sister and queen, clothed in moonlight, with fingers that stitched destiny into flesh. They were not merely divine, they were longing itself, given shape. Two hearts beating in endless echo, two souls entwined before the word love ever tasted mortal lips. This is their story, but it is not only theirs. It is the tale of what happens when life loves death, when eternity bends toward desire, when the divine learns to mourn. For in the breathless hush of myth, where time curls like incense and eternity is a kiss never finished, Isis and Osiris became the wound and the balm, the ache of separation and the trembling hope of return. Even now, when its waters ripple under the sun's command, even now, when the reeds murmur prayers no man can translate, the river recalls. For he drank their passion, tasted their sorrow, and carried their fragments down through 1,000 dawns. He knows what the scrolls forgot, how Isis wept her lover back into existence, how her tears summoned the stars, how she, a goddess of 10,000 names, became one name only: devotion. In the beginning, there was harmony. The world pulsed in unison, gods and men not yet separated by fear or fire. Osiris ruled Egypt with gentle hands and wise eyes. Wherever he walked, the earth awakened. Barley sprung golden in his shadow. Orchards bent low with offerings of fruit. He taught the people to sow, to reap, to honor the soil and the sun alike. His voice was music, not command. And at his side, Isis, not merely a queen, but the breath between life and meaning. She walked behind him, beside him, within him. Her magic was not thunderous like storms, but soft as skin against skin, powerful in silence, in stillness. When she spoke, the elements paused to listen. When she closed her eyes, the air held its breath. She was healer, sorceress, mother of the throne. Her spells were not carved in stone, but whispered into being. She wove protection with strands of breath. With a single word, she could part the veil between body and soul, and in her gaze, even the sun learned to linger. They were the mirror of balance, male and female, light and dusk, seed and bloom. But no balance is untouched by envy. And so, hidden in the folds of eternity, where shadows nestle behind light, there waited another, Set, brother to Osiris, storm-eyed and jealous, carved from chaos. He hungered not only for the throne, but for the unraveling of harmony itself. His heart was a hollow drum, echoing with absence. Where Osiris gave life, Set desired dominion. Where Isis loved, he coveted not love, but possession, not unity, but rupture. Set's footsteps were silent, split in half. He moved like drought through the garden, like cracked bone beneath silk. And when he watched them, Isis and Osiris, he saw not beauty, but betrayal, not a circle, but a gate he could not pass through. The stars trembled when Set's gaze turned upon his brother. And so began the slow collapse of paradise. But that is not this moment. No, this moment is still golden, untouched, sacred. The air is thick with perfume. Lotuses bloom along the Nile's mouth, petals blushing at the wind's caress. The sun spills honey across temple walls. Priests chant forgotten names while the people press their bodies to warm earth in gratitude. And in the center of it all, Osiris and Isis. He, garbed in emerald robes, eyes lined in kohl, a scepter in his palm like a shepherd's staff. She, veiled in linen that clings like mist, anklets chiming as she moves, her laughter soft as river foam. They touch, not in haste, not in hunger, but with the knowledge of eternity. Each kiss is a vow, each glance a ritual. When Isis rests her hand upon his chest, the crops feel it. When Osiris speaks her name, the moon brightens. Their union is not a moment, it is a season, a rhythm, a tide. She lies beside him at night, tracing the constellations of his ribs, whispering names into the hollow of his throat. He watches her breathe and imagines galaxies forming in the curve of her lips. They do not yet know what time will take. They do not yet know how grief carves hollows no god can fill. But the myth knows. The myth has always known. It curls beneath the surface of their joy, coiling gently, waiting for the fall. Like a serpent beneath silk, like night hidden inside the day. Already the sand listens. Already vultures wheel too low. Already fate stirs. O listener, O wanderer in the realm of whispers, do you feel it? That ache beneath the beauty? That trembling between the lines? This is not merely a tale of gods and crowns. This is not marble and statue. This is skin and ache, breath and yearning. This is the myth that bleeds. It weeps not from wounds, but from love so deep that the heavens could not contain it. It pulses in all things, in your sighs, in your dreams, in the tremor of your fingertips when you reach for someone who may not return. It is in every prayer uttered at dusk, in every candle lit for the dead, in every woman who waits, in every man who wanders, in every child who dreams of flying through darkness to find what was lost. Isis will search the ends of the earth. She will stitch flesh from fragments. She will dare to love a corpse. And in her arms life will remember how to breathe again. But not yet. For now let the petals fall gently into the Nile. Let the scent of blue lotus and myrrh saturate the air. Let the divine lovers dance in ignorance of fate, in the golden hush before the shatter. Let Osiris kiss Isis as though time were his servant. Let Isis trace the curve of his spine as though she could hold him forever. Let us linger here in this sacred stillness, where gods make love beneath eternity's gaze, and the river watches in silence, its memory just beginning.
Before temples bore their images in stone, before scrolls inked their names in sacred syllables, they were presence, unspoken, undeniable, not just gods, not just lovers, not merely rulers. They were essence, and in their essence the world found rhythm. He was born not from womb, but from cosmic breath, Osiris, Lord of life, son of sky and soil, the green god, the pulse of resurrection. Where he walked, the earth softened. Where he lingered, the wind grew warm. His body carried the elegance of eternity, tall as temple pillars, shoulders calm as twilight seas, with arms like branches of a sacred fig, always reaching, always enfolding. His presence did not demand attention, it invited surrender. There was no edge in his voice, only melody, the kind that slips between ribs and lives there quietly. When he spoke, barley swayed as if listening. When he smiled, the clouds opened. And when he wept, though he rarely did, even the stars shivered. His skin shimmered with the color of fertile earth after rain. His eyes, deep pools lined in kohl, saw not just what was, but what could be, should one dare to hope. He ruled not by decree, but by rhythm, like the Nile, never needing to shout to be heard. To mortals, he was Pharaoh. To gods, he was anchor. To Isis, he was breath. She came cloaked in silver breath, born of starlight and night's first sigh. Isis, mother of magic, goddess of life, queen not merely of Egypt, but of transformation itself. She was the whisper in the dark that soothes the wounded. She was the song that pulls bones back into form. She was mystery, not to be solved, but worshipped. Her beauty was not the kind carved in marble. It was softer, older, the kind that shifted like moonlight on water. Her limbs moved like incense smoke. Her fingers knew the weight of spells, the shape of healing, the music of silence. To touch her was to forget all harm. To meet her eyes was to remember your own name, not the one given at birth, but the one you had before time began. She did not wear power, she breathed it. Her magic was the slow unraveling of what binds and the gentle weaving of what saves. With a murmur, she could lift the dead. With a kiss, she could still a storm. She held 10,000 names, but Osiris called her only one, beloved. She would follow him through death. She would teach breath to forgotten bones. She would wait, always, for his return. But that is later. Now she lies beside him, laughing softly at some private thought. Her hands, delicate and sure, trace patterns into the curve of his hip. Her voice hums with knowledge older than God's. He listens, not just because he loves her, but because she speaks truth that even the stars hush to hear. Together, they are the axis, sun and moon, root and blossom, wound and balm. They did not fall in love, they rose into it, slowly, like sunrise over dunes, inevitable and holy. From the beginning, they were woven from the same breath, not opposites, but echoes. Their love was not of this world. It was older than hunger, deeper than pain. It was sensual, yes. Their bodies knew each other the way rivers know curves, the way petals know sunlight. But more than flesh, they shared longing. They shared purpose. When Osiris kissed Isis, he was not claiming her. He was remembering himself. When she opened to him, it was not submission. It was invocation. Each night they lay together was a renewal of the cosmos. Each sigh was a spell. Each gaze a vow to never forget. They needed no temple. They were the temple. He, wrapped in emerald and gold, the scent of cedar and warm earth clinging to his skin. She, draped in linen thinner than breath, skin tasting of myrrh and lotus. They touched, not in haste, not in hunger, but with reverence. When he slid his fingers along the curve of her waist, the Nile rose. When she pressed her lips to the hollow of his throat, the birds sang before dawn. They were not just divine, they were divine together. And yet, even paradise casts shadows. In every tale of light, there is the longing for its end. In every sanctuary, the sound of rust beginning. In every family, a heart that turns away. Set was that turning. He was born of the same gods, carved from the same breath, and yet he emerged twisted, storm-eyed, all edge and bone. Where Osiris brought balance, Set brought ache. Where Isis healed, Set tore. He was not evil, he was emptiness, the kind that howls in the dark when all candles have gone out. He watched them, Osiris and Isis, and felt not admiration, but violation. In their unity, he saw a wall that would not let him in. In their joy, a mockery of his hunger. He desired not what they had, he desired to unmake what they were. His limbs were forged of flame, his voice crackled like dry reeds. The desert followed him like a lover, and death whispered his name with thirst. He was chaos in skin, fury wrapped in ritual, and yet, beneath it all, something small and trembling, not love, but need. He once reached for Isis, not in lust, but in desperate need to be seen. She looked through him, her gaze soft but distant. She saw his wound, but not his name. And so he turned, from brother to rival, from guardian to usurper, from shadow to storm. He did not only want Osiris's throne, he wanted his place, in the center, in the gaze of the world, in the arms of destiny. But fate had already chosen. The river had already spoken. The stars had written Isis and Osiris across the night, and Set would never forgive it. And so the stage was set, the lovers enshrined in bliss, the brother coiled in silence, the myth poised on the edge of fracture. But in this moment, this fleeting shimmer of golden stillness, Isis wraps her arms around Osiris as though eternity were skin. He presses his lips to her temple as though he can imprint his soul there. Set watches from a distance, jaw clenched, heart a cavern echoing with the question he cannot voice. How does one undo a love that the gods themselves have blessed? The answer waits. It breathes between chapters. It trembles beneath the sand. But for now, let the lovers linger. Let the sun rest on their skin. Let the silence before sorrow be full of song.
There is a silence that comes before betrayal, still as dusk before the storm. It is not peace, it is pause, a breath drawn too deep, a heartbeat stretched too long. And in that silence, Set waited. Not like a man, not even like a god, but like a wound with teeth. He watched his brother crowned in green, wrapped in linen and light, kissed by Isis in a temple filled with incense and song. He watched the kingdom bloom under Osiris's rule, crops rising, rivers singing, children born beneath star-flooded skies. And in every blossom, he saw a blade. In every kiss, a theft. The throne, the gaze, the love, all stolen from him. He told himself it was justice, but it was hunger. It was unseen. It was the ache of being outside. He invited Osiris to a feast, grand, perfumed, rich with wine and music, not to honor him, but to unmake him. The whole was filled with laughter, but it rang hollow beneath the gold. At the center was a coffin, exquisite, carved of cedar and inlaid with lapis lazuli. Set, smiling like a serpent, claimed it as a gift. A game, he said. Whosoever fits within it shall claim it. Osiris, noble even in play, stepped forward. He lay down within, his body perfect in symmetry, filling the space exactly. And with a hiss, like sand sliding from stone, Set slammed shut the lid. Chains, nails, spells. The box sealed. The laughter died. Set did not shout. He did not gloat. He lifted the coffin as though it were not his brother, but a shadow, and flung it into the Nile. The river, loyal and ancient, howled. The stars blinked once, then turned their faces. And just like that, the axis cracked. Isis's grief. When she heard, Isis did not scream. Not at first. She stood still, one hand over her heart, the other trembling at her side. The breath fled her lips as if Osiris had taken it with him. Her body remained upright, queenly, divine, but inside her something crumbled, not like stone, like silk soaked in blood.
Then she moved, not as a goddess, but as a lover, not in ritual, but in desperation. She tore the palace veil from her face. She stripped herself of crown, of perfume, of ceremony. She became storm. She walked the riverbanks barefoot, robes clinging to her like second skin, wind howling her grief across the reeds. Every step she took bloomed wildflowers and wept salt. Her voice echoed through tombs and mountains. She sang his name not as a spell, but as a plea. Osiris, Osiris, Osiris. She asked the fish if they had seen him. She asked the waves if they had cradled him. She asked the stars, and when they did not answer, she wept until even they dimmed with shame. Her tears were not delicate. They carved valleys. They cracked stone. Grief was not passive in her hands. It became motion, obsession, ritual. She followed the Nile to its mouth and beyond, sailing alone in a papyrus skiff, unbound hair, lips chapped from prayer. She kissed the soil of every river bend. She laid her hands on every tree, every stone. And when she found him, at last, washed ashore in Byblos, she did not collapse. She knelt. Gently, reverently, she touched the coffin's edge, pressing her cheek to the cedar like it was his flesh. She whispered words not meant for this world, words that dripped with longing, with fury, with devotion that could resurrect galaxies. I will not let you be forgotten. I will not let you end. I will breathe you back into me if I must. She took him home, not to palace or temple, but to a grove hidden by spell and starlight. There she opened the coffin with fingers trembling like reeds in wind, and there she saw him, cold, perfect, still, the god of life, now hushed as death. Her scream then, it split the dusk. It awakened birds that had never flown. It turned sand to glass. She touched every inch of his skin with her mouth, her palms, her tears. She spoke to him, not hoping for reply, but because silence was worse. She lay beside him as she once had, cradling him with arms that once summoned suns. She kissed his eyes. She laced her fingers with his. She pressed her lips to his throat, his chest, the hollow of his hips, not to arouse, but to remember. Desire became prayer. Grief became hunger. To hold him again, to feel him stir, to make love not with body alone, but with time, with memory, with hope. This was her sacred obsession. And the world, sensing her longing, trembled. Set strikes again. But harmony once broken does not quiet easily. Set, learning of her success, grew wild. His envy swelled into madness. He did not fear Isis's love. He loathed it, because it reminded him what he would never receive, because it proved that there were things even death could not silence. He came in storm. He came in fire. He came in hate. He found Osiris's body again, and this time he did not lock it away. He tore it apart. 14 pieces, scattered across Egypt, a god divided. And Set laughed, but it was hollow, because even broken, Osiris was loved. Isis's sacred desire. This was no longer grief. This was purpose. She would gather him again, piece by piece, breath by breath. with her sister Nephthys, with jackal-headed Anubis, with herbs and oils and spells older than language, she began. She walked desert and delta. She sang to vultures. She turned wind into scent, scent into compass. She found his hand in a cave, his ribs beneath a tree, his spine buried beneath a temple. Each time she wept. Each time she kissed the flesh and cradled it as if it were whole, until she had all but won. Even so, she did not stop. She carved a new one, sacred and strong. She laid all the parts together, and then she knelt over him, not in mourning, but in magic. She became wind, she became fire, she became hawk and goddess and lover and storm. She rose over his body and drew him into her. Not symbol, not dream, union. For a single night, across stars, across silence, he lived again, inside her, through her, with her. And in that moment, her body remembered the shape of joy, her womb filled with a future. Their love became seed. From death she birthed Horus. From ruin she birthed hope. But her eyes never stopped searching the sky. Her skin never forgot his touch, and her soul, oh, her soul, became the blueprint for all who ache, all who mourn, all who love. The world would know grief, but it would also know resurrection, because Isis loved. Not with meekness, not with surrender, but with fire that would burn across time. Osiris was gone, and yet not. Set had won, and yet lost. And Isis, she had become eternity.
She stood beneath the moon, her skin kissed by silver, her breath deep as the Nile's belly. Around her the world held still. No bird, no wind, no god dared speak. The body of Osiris lay before her, no longer absent, no longer scattered, but whole again by her own hands. Every piece found, every part rejoined, save the one the river had swallowed, and even that she had shaped anew, from gold and longing. Now came the moment, the last threshold, not death, not life, but the seam where desire becomes divinity. Isis knelt beside him. Her fingers trailed his limbs, reverent as a priestess, tender as a lover. She had washed him in lotus milk and oiled his skin with cedar resin. She had wrapped him in linen soaked with tears and incantations. Her hands knew every contour of him. Ribs like flutes of sound, hips like carved moonstone, lips that even in death held silence like a secret. He was beautiful still, not in warmth, but in form, not in breath, but in promise. She whispered spells as old as sky. They fell from her tongue like honey, thick with ancient power. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with ache for what they had lost, for what they might reclaim, even if just for a moment. She circled his body in silence. Her bare feet touched the ground like petals. Her shadow kissed his chest. Every step was ritual, every breath a verse. Around them the stars began to pulse, as if the heavens themselves held their breath. When all was ready, she disrobed, not for shame, not for display, but because flesh speaks a language older than word or prayer, because this was not a conjuring. This was communion. Her body was an altar now, a bridge between death and longing, between silence and song. She stood above him, her hair loose as the river's flow, her skin warm with memory. She raised her hands to the sky, to Nut, to the stars, to the void where gods whisper. And in that stillness she called him back, not with force, not with demand, but with invitation. She lowered herself to him, not abruptly, but as dusk meets the sea, slow, inevitable, trembling with anticipation. Her lips met his, soft, then firm, then opening. She gave him breath, not hers alone, but breath woven with spells, with dreams, with the memory of touch and laughter and moans shared beneath curtains of incense. Her kiss was not to awaken, it was to remind. You were once alive. You were once mine. You are still. Then she lay atop him, not like the weight of grief, but like the curve of sky over earth, like tide over sand, like lover over lover. Her body aligned with his, breast to chest, belly to belly, thigh to thigh, sacred to sacred. She felt the cold of him, the stillness, but beneath it, something stirred. A whisper in bone, a ripple in air. Her hips moved slowly, not in lust, but in summoning. She rocked not to reach pleasure, but to birth presence. Her breath deepened, her moans, quiet, steady, merged with the night. Their skin, separated by death, now sang with memory. His scent, musk and myrrh and eternity. Her touch, soft as papyrus, fierce as flame. She kissed his throat, his chest, the hollows of his pelvis. She spoke his name between gasps, like an invocation. Osiris, Osiris, Osiris. Her fingers laced into his hair, her thighs gripped his hips, her breath fell upon him like petals, soaked in sweat and prayer. And then, the moment, the ripple, the return. He exhaled, a gasp, small, broken, real. His chest lifted, his lips parted, and her tears fell like stormlight. She rose upon him, her spine arching with power, not as a queen now, not even as a goddess, but as a force, woman and wind and will entwined. They moved together, slowly, achingly, as if time itself had become flesh and wanted to feel. Their joining was not climax, it was creation. Every stroke of her hips was a line in a scripture not yet written. Every cry was a seed of cosmos, every shiver a constellation born. His hands found her waist, his eyes, dark with wonder, filled with her. And she wept, laughing, gasping his name. There was no language now, only breath, only rhythm. Only them. He kissed her, and in that kiss was the Nile's depth, the star's ache, the first light of dawn. And in that moment, their moment, she received him, not just into her body, but into time. She felt it bloom within her, a flicker, a flame, a sun, Horus. Not just child, not just heir, but the continuation of love. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their bodies had said it all in heat, in ache, in sweat, and sigh and sacred motion. He looked into her eyes. She pressed her forehead to his. They breathed as one,
for one last night. Then he slept. Not death, not absence, but a holy slumber. And she wrapped him in linen again, kissed every part once more. She sang as she wrapped, lullabies of grief and joy braided together. She painted his eyelids with gold. She sealed his heart in lapis. She laid her hand over his chest and whispered, "You are not gone. You are not broken. You are mine." When she left the grove, she was not the same. She walked upright, but every part of her still held him. Her thighs remembered his grip, her lips remembered his breath, her womb pulsed with his seed, her soul forged anew in fire, and surrender burned with knowing. She had done the impossible. She had made love to death and born life. Not with conquest, but with tenderness, with longing, with ritual, with touch. And from that night forward, women prayed not just to Isis for magic, but for passion that heals, for union that transcends. And men dreamed not just of kingship, but of being loved so fully they would return from the grave to feel it again.
Dawn broke in silence, not with triumph, not with song, but with a hush, like the hush of a breath held too long, released with reverence. The grove where Isis had summoned life now shimmered with stillness. Morning dew clung to petals. The air smelled of myrrh and wet earth. Time, briefly undone by love, began again. Osiris lay at peace, wrapped in the linen she had blessed with kisses and tears. His eyes closed. His chest no longer stirred, but his essence remained. Not lost, not vanquished, merely elsewhere. For life, even when summoned by love, does not dwell where it does not belong. And Osiris, king of green things, lover of light, had touched death too deeply. He could not remain. Isis sat beside him, her body wrapped in silence. Her hands, so recently conduits of magic and desire, now rested upon her womb. There, beneath her skin, a flicker moved. She smiled. It was not joy, not fully, but a fullness that grief could not hollow. She leaned over Osiris and pressed her lips once more to his brow, a final seal. Her fingers lingered on his chest, over the spot where his heart had stirred beneath hers. You are gone from this world, but you will rule another. The wind answered her, cool, low, and strange. It came from the west, from the place where the sun sinks and spirits walk. It wrapped itself around the body of Osiris, curling like mist, like a river remembering the shape of a stone long buried. And then he was gone. Not vanished, not stolen, but drawn into the veil, into the place between endings and beginnings. Osiris, clothed in the linen of love,
passed beyond the mortal plane. He descended not into darkness, but into depth. There, beneath the world of men and gods, he found a kingdom unshaped, a silent realm waiting for order. The dead drifted aimlessly, lost to memory. Their souls ached for purpose, for meaning, for a king to hold them. And so he became what none had been. Not just a ruler of bones, but a guardian of passage. He raised his voice, and silence bowed. He extended his hand, and the shadows became stars. Osiris, once prince of the harvest, now reigned in the land of the dead. Not in decay, but in dignity. He built a throne from the echoes of last breaths. He crowned himself with the weight of all endings. He judged with mercy, for he had known love. He reigned with stillness, for he had known longing. And above him, in the world of light, Isis carried his legacy. She walked the edge of the Nile, veiled in linen, her belly rising like the first curve of the crescent moon. Each step she took was a prayer, each breath a promise. The people whispered her name with awe and softness. Isis, widow and warrior, Isis, mother and magician, Isis, whose womb bore the heir of a lost god. She did not seek temples, though temples were built. She did not cry aloud, though grief still burned her bones. She carried her sorrow like a sacred flame, steady, open, eternal. At night, she dreamed of Osiris, not as corpse, not as god, but as man, his laughter echoing down corridors of stars. And when the ache became too much, she pressed her hands to her belly and felt the stirring of their son, Horus. Not born yet, but already becoming. A life forged from loss, a spirit conceived in the heat of ritual and resurrection, heir to two realms, of sun and of shadow. What love creates, it cannot always keep. And this too was divine. For what greater love than to lose and still give thanks? What greater strength than to birth hope from the ashes of parting? In Osiris's absence, Isis became more than consort. She became symbol, beacon, mother of the living, guardian of the line, voice of endurance. And all who suffered, all who mourned, turned their faces toward her and saw that pain could carry light. When Horus was born, the wind changed. It carried his cry across sand and field. It stirred the reeds. It made even the falcons pause in flight. He came with his father's gaze, calm, piercing, and his mother's spirit, untamed, luminous. He did not know the arms of Osiris, but he knew the stories whispered to him each night. He knew the sacred names, the lullabies woven with spells, the tears hidden in lull and smile. And one day he would rise. He would challenge Set. He would avenge his father. He would restore balance. But that was still to come. For now, Isis rocked him in her arms beneath a sky that held both sun and memory. She sang of fields that never wither, of thrones forged from silence, of men who become stars when touched by love. And above, far beyond reach, but never beyond feeling, Osiris watched. He saw the movement of her lips. He felt the warmth of the child he had planted in that one holy night. And though they were parted by planes and rules no magic could break, their bond endured. Not as it had before, in flesh and fire, but in legacy, in myth, in the unshakable truth that what they made lived. So it was written, and so it would be told, that death could not unmake love, that longing could carve paths through worlds, that from a single act of sacred union new gods could rise. Osiris became the heart of the West, the keeper of endings. Isis became the breath of the East, the bringer of dawn. And between them Horus grew under the weight of prophecy. The world, once torn, began to mend, not because pain ceased, but because love had endured it. And every seed sown, every temple raised, every prayer whispered beneath stars remembered their story. The god who descended, the goddess who would not yield, the child who would carry their flame.
Time, like the Nile, flows ever forward, but in its currents are eddies, and in those eddies memory, and in memory myth, not as fiction, but as truth remembered through wonder. So hear now, not with ears, but with the inner hush, the place inside the chest that tightens when loss becomes love, and love becomes legacy. For the tale of Isis and Osiris does not end with their parting. It lives, like pollen riding wind, like a name uttered under breath. It dwells in the soft pulse of longing, in the places where grief and hope fold into one. There is no death without love. There is no love without risk. And yet we love, despite the ache, because of it. In Isis's hands, love was not a fragile flower, but a blade softened by tears, a ritual that bent time, a sacred violence that undid even death. She did not flee from sorrow. She entered it, robes trailing sand, heart bare, lips salt-stung, to pull from it what none had dared. Not only her husband, not only a god, but a fragment of divine order, broken and remade by yearning. And in Osiris's stillness there was no bitterness. He accepted the descent, not as punishment, but as metamorphosis. He who once ruled wheat and sun now ruled silence and endings. And yet even in the underworld he remembered the curve of her fingers, the tremble in her breath when she had called him back, the echo of their bodies merging, not in lust, but in reverence. That remembrance shaped his reign. It softened his judgments.
It made him more than a sovereign of shadows. It made him human, and thus more divine. Isis never remarried, not because she was bound by duty, but because her love had not ended, only transformed. Each morning she rose before the sun, her fingers tracing glyphs in the air. She whispered his name into dawn's hush, as if she could lace the coming light with his breath. When she taught, she spoke of healing. When she wept, she turned her tears into potions. When she bled, once each moon, she buried the cloth in sacred ground, that the earth might drink of her sacred rhythm. And when Horus asked why his father could not walk among them, she did not lie. She said, "Because some loves are too vast for one world." Her voice was not broken, it was deepened. She did not wear her pain like armor. She wore it like silk, delicate, flowing, transparent. And in that transparency, the world saw truth. Love is not safe. Love is not simple. Love is the promise made with open hands, knowing the wind may take what you cherish. But it is still a promise worth making, because love, in the end, does not vanish. It becomes myth. It becomes river. It becomes the murmur in the reeds that line the Nile's edge. So the people built temples, not to conquer death, but to honor love's refusal to yield to it. Statues rose of Isis, arms outstretched, not in command, but in welcome. Tombs bore the eye of Horus, watching, avenging, remembering. And the book of coming forth by day, what others would call the book of the dead, spoke not of endings, but of transitions. Osiris, the judge; Isis, the initiator; Horus, the bridge. Each soul who passed beneath their gaze was measured not by perfection, but by capacity to love. What had you lost? What had you dared? Whom had you carried when the weight broke you? These were the questions whispered in eternity, and the answers, though wordless, sang through time. Even now, millennia faded into dust, their story lingers, in the rhythm of tides, in the breath drawn before a lover's kiss, in the silence after a final goodbye. Isis walks still, not in flesh, but in every woman who mourns with grace, who creates despite despair, who resurrects joy from ruin. Osiris dwells not in tombs, but in every man who yields power for wisdom, who accepts loss and becomes guardian to others, who reigns in stillness rather than force. And between them, the world spins, a child born of grief and hope. The Nile still flows, not straight, not clean, but winding, ancient, alive. Its waters carry sediment and soul alike. Its banks remember, its winds whisper. Whisper her name, Isis, and then his, Osiris. And if you listen long enough, not with ears, but with longing, you will hear the echo of what was once spoken in the hush of dawn. I will find you. I will gather your pieces. I will breathe life into you with my lips. And you will know, not in mind, but in marrow, that love, true love, is not extinguished by endings. It becomes ritual. It becomes river. it becomes song. Let this myth not rest in books, not sleep in silent stone. Let it live in the trembling hands of the grieving, in the lips that kiss memory into the air, in the bodies that press together, not to forget death, but to defy it. Let Isis be the breath of those who love deeply. Let Osiris be the stillness within the storm. And let Horus be the future, born from what was nearly lost. And let their story be yours. Not because you are divine, but because you too have loved and lost and dared to rise again. So when the night comes, when silence grows long and your heart aches with old names, walk to the water's edge, kneel, touch the river, and listen. You will hear it, low and soft, winding through reeds, carried by moonlight, wrapped in ancient wind, the whisper of a promise, of a goddess and a god, of breath given where there was none, of a love so holy it made the dead rise and the world turn again. And it will say, "Still, I love you."